My stalker hid in my apartment for months, and it turns out it was my landlord. 3 years ago, I was trying to get out of a toxic relationship. My boyfriend was extremely controlling and possessive. He would show up to my job just to make sure that I was actually there, and after 6 months of living together, I'd had enough. I planned everything perfectly. I told my parents to meet me at our apartment at 2 in the morning. I only took my passport and my wallet and left while my ex was sleeping. After that, I had to get a restraining order from him because he kept stalking me. Needless to say, I never thought this would happen to me ever again. Moved in with my parents, and trust me, I would have lived with them forever had it not been for the fact that I landed my dream job in a different city. My parents helped me move into this really beautiful duplex. The day we moved in, we met my landlords. They were a cute couple in their 40s. They looked so kind and sweet. Once I moved in, everything was wonderful. I decorated the apartment exactly how I liked it. My dream job was amazing, and I even started dating again. But I started hearing noises. Sometimes I would hear furniture being moved upstairs. When I would run upstairs, nothing was there. And then I started hearing a man moaning. Things would be moved around when I would come home. One time I found my fridge open, and my underwear would always go missing. I decided to install cameras, and 2 days after that, I heard more moaning. I called the police immediately, and when they showed up, they searched the house. Upstairs, in a guest bedroom full of boxes, they find my landlord. He had set up a mattress, food, and his laptop, even had a bag of clothes. And of course, on his laptop, they found videos of everything. Me with boys in my bedroom doing you know what, me in the shower. This man had cameras everywhere, and his mattress was full of you know what. Thank God he was prosecuted, and his wife blamed me. I got a bigger house and moved my parents in with me. I will never date men again. What would you have done? Am I the asshole for stealing money to get a BBL? And the BBL almost killed me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, let me on Instagram. I'm 27 years old, and my life changed in 2017. I went kind of viral on Instagram after I posted some bikini pictures, and then I got a bunch of male followers. And to be honest, I have zero talents. I don't know how to cook, not a good actress. I'm really not good at anything other than like posting pictures. So I decided to make Instagram my job. My dream was to be like these other IG baddies. They all had BBLs, expensive cars, and they made so much money. So I decided to get a BBL. The problem is I was totally broke. So I came up with a plan, and I didn't tell anybody. I would get my followers to send me about $200, and then I would send them pictures in return. But I would promise private stuff, and I never sent it. I would send them like a bikini picture here and there, but these guys couldn't get their money back. So I just started blocking everyone who sent me money. After 3 months, I had 50K. I ran over to a plastic surgeon. I got my BBL, but it was gruesome. For 3 months, the recovery was horrible. I had to wear fajas and get massages. I went on a clean diet. Finally, after 3 months, I had my dream body. And when I started posting my new body, I gained 100,000 new followers. But then after 7 months, I started feeling sick all the time. I was really tired and had all these weird symptoms. And my butt would smell bad too. It was very hard to clean my new butt. That's when my doctor told me I had an infection from the BBL. I had to go on these crazy antibiotics, and I gained a bunch of weight. I looked horrible. My butt was astronomical. I was sick for 7 months. Now my body does look good again, but I regret this decision so much. I always have complications and my butt smells bad. Would you do it? My boyfriend confessed that he got his ex-girlfriend pregnant. I took him back though. Just wait and see why. Disclaimer, this is not my story time with Estertaniaj on Instagram. This is part 2. On our very first date, he told me that his ex had been stalking him for months. She was possessive and obsessed with him. So much so that he pointed out the window and she was sitting in her car watching us at the restaurant. That's when he just started to cry. I felt really bad for him. I could see how stressed he was, but I also needed to think about myself. But no, I didn't. Instead, we started hanging out every single day. And something would happen every single day. His ex-girlfriend started showing up to my house whenever he came over. Thankfully, I live with my parents. I felt safe knowing my parents were home even though this girl was knocking on my door. She would also call my phone every single day at 3 a.m. And then the worst part is she started showing up to my job. Now, this is when we realized instead of stalking him, she started stalking me. The worst part was when she showed up to the gym dressed exactly like I was. She wore the same red leggings and sports bra, and even styled her hair the same way I did. My boyfriend and I left the gym immediately, but she followed us. Part 3 is up. My boyfriend confessed that he got his ex-girlfriend pregnant. And yes, I took him back, but you'll never guess why. Disclaimer, this is not my story time with Estertaniaj on Instagram. Part 1. My boyfriend and I started dating almost 6 months ago. We actually met at the gym. But back then, he was going to the gym with his girlfriend every single day. But that wouldn't stop me from staring once in a while. He was the most beautiful man I'd ever seen. Of course, I knew that he was off limits. Fast forward a few months. I noticed that he started coming to the gym on his own. Finally, a few weeks later, he introduces himself to me. He was so formal, shook my hand and said, "I've been coming to the gym with my girlfriend and that's who you saw me with. But I'm no longer with her. I would love to take you out on a date." How could I say no to that? Especially after he caught me staring at him so many times. He knew I was into him. We went out on 3 dates exactly before he asked me to be his girlfriend. On the very first date, he told me that his ex had been stalking him. That's when he points at the window. His ex is sitting in her car staring at us while we're inside the restaurant. Then he just started to cry. I realized this was serious. He was so stressed. And after that, we were inseparable. But things just get worse because she started stalking me. Part 2 is up. My boyfriend confessed he got his ex-girlfriend pregnant. Disclaimer, this is not my story time with Storytime on Instagram. This girl was completely obsessed with me. She stalked me for over a month. One day my boyfriend shows up to my parents' house bawling. That's when my dad told him that he needed to leave. My parents were terrified this girl would do something to me. And that's when he just said to us, she's pregnant. A few days before we went out on our first date, they ended up hooking up one last time. Apparently she had been begging him. She swears up and down that the baby is his, but my parents don't buy it. My boyfriend now feels extremely guilty for bringing her into my life. Now my boyfriend has to take her to all the doctor's appointments, and she asked me to step aside. I didn't know what else to do, so I broke up with him. With a caveat, we're still seeing each other in secret, but this has stopped her from stalking me. Once the baby's born, there will be a paternity test. I guess I'll update you guys then. Bye. I paid a random guy to stalk me to get my boyfriend jealous. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It's sending me on Instagram. I repeat, this is not my story time. My boyfriend's already tried to break up with me 4 times this month, so I needed to think of a plan to make him jealous so that he could want to be with me. Here's a little backstory on how we met. He and I both come from the same country, and we actually lived in the same neighborhood. His parents moved to the US, and then my parents moved to the US. So when we got there, luckily we knew his family, and it was really nice because my parents had somebody they could rely on. Well, can you probably guess? I had the biggest crush with him. I was literally in love with him from the time I met him when we were back in our country. When we would play as kids, I was like 10, but when we moved to the States, I was 16. So I was a little bit more grown up. I was hoping that he would see me and fall in love with me at first sight, but unfortunately it didn't happen like that. Instead, I waited until we were in college. I had a full glow up at this point. I grew out my hair and I stopped coloring it blonde. I got myself a skincare routine and I just decided to dress more feminine. I was 20 years old. I looked like a whole different person and I looked like a woman. He had been traveling for about a year and finally he came back. And the day he came back, our parents decided to have dinner together. And when he saw me again for the first time, he actually did a double take. It's like he almost didn't recognize who I was. Throughout the dinner, he kept staring at me, and finally at the end of the night, I told him that I liked him. This is when he told me that he had never thought of me that way, and I asked him if we could just hang out for the week. He said yes. And by the end of the week, he asked me to be his girlfriend. And this is where I messed up. I started becoming really jealous and controlling. I realized that he had a lot of girlfriends, and he just always was hanging out with his friends. He was always texting his friend group, and I just felt like he wasn't giving me enough attention. So I told him that he needed to spend more time with me and less time with his friends. And he agreed. One night while he was taking a nap, I installed an app on his phone that lets me track him. The app also forwards all of his messages over to my phone. This just made me feel better about the relationship. But then he started accusing me of being controlling. I guess me telling him to hang out with me more and less with his friends was not good. And also I told him to stop talking to his girlfriends. Then he broke up with me, and I was devastated. Now look, yes, I was a little bit jealous and controlling, but I mean, come on. All relationships are like that. So I came up with a plan. I went up to this random guy in my college and I told him that if he stalked me, I would pay him $100 a week. I just wanted him to send me text messages, emails, and pictures of myself. Like he was following me around and he would just like take a picture and then send it to me. And then I started forwarding all of that to my ex. And it actually started to work. He said that he wanted to protect me. So he started spending more time with me. He would always make sure that I got home safe. Then I told him that my stalker spoke to me and that he was actually cute. And that maybe I should just date my stalker instead of him. He drove all the way to my house and asked me to be his girlfriend again. Everything was okay for a little bit, but then I started getting jealous again. Like I said, he's tried to break up with me 4 times this month. So I told him that my stalker came back. I kind of feel bad for lying about the stalker. I don't want him to break up with me. Am I crazy for doing this? What do you think? My life has been ruined by war. Disclaimer, thank you to Rosanna for sharing her story with us. I do not support war. I support humans who are suffering. And I am here to tell their stories. I'm Rosanna and I'm 27 years old. My husband Rami is 29 and we have a 3-year-old child. My husband's name is Rami and he's 29 years old. We have a 3-year-old child and his name is Ziad. We used to live a quiet life in Gaza City. The past months have been treacherous for my family and I. Because of the ongoing war in Gaza, we have lost everything. We've been deprived of our basic human needs: clean water, adequate food, and the ability to move freely. Miserable conditions have affected my son's health. He's lost so much weight and his psychological condition has deteriorated. We have no source of income because of the war. It is extremely expensive to move or to even buy basic needs. My husband unfortunately lost his job and is no longer able to continue his profession. My biggest concern as a mother is my son's health. The scarcity of clean water and nutritious food have impacted his health, and I have limited options. Our only possible way to survive is to evacuate through Egypt, but in order to move, we need around $5,000 to $7,000 each. This is a call for help and a cry for humanity. Any small amount that you can donate will make a great impact. Rosanna's GoFundMe is going to be linked in my bio. If you have anything, even $1 will help. If you guys want me to do someone's story, please let me know in the comments. Or if you have your own, just send it to me through Instagram. I hope you guys are all safe out there, and I love you guys. Bye. My boyfriend kicked me out of my apartment at 3 in the morning. Is this normal? Disclaimer, is not my story time. My boyfriend is extremely insecure. Let me start off by saying I have never cheated on him, but he accuses me of it every single day. If I go to the gym, if I go to the supermarket, it doesn't matter where I go, he's always thinking that I'm trying to look for guys. A couple of days he accused me of it again. I showed him proof that I was at my mother's house. He got so angry that he started yelling at me. And he yelled for 2 hours. I'm not exaggerating. My neighbor knocked on our door and asked if I was okay. That's when my boyfriend pushed me out the door and locked me out. It was 3 in the morning. My neighbor, who's my age, asked me to come over to my place and I said no. I needed to get back into my apartment, the apartment that I pay rent for. I knocked on the door for an hour and he still wouldn't open. By the way, I was just wearing a t-shirt. I had no shoes on, no phone. I finally knock on my neighbor's door and she lets me sleep in her place. An hour later, my boyfriend comes knocking on the door insisting that I come home. When I went back into my apartment, there was broken glass everywhere. Then he started apologizing for breaking my dishes, not for the fact that he kicked me out of my apartment at 3 in the morning. You won't believe it, but things got even worse. I go to my bedroom and what do I see? Go to part 2. My boyfriend kicked me out of my apartment at 3 in the morning. Is that normal? Disclaimer, this is not my story time. He finally lets me back into my apartment. I see a bunch of broken dishes on the floor. He casually apologizes and tells me to go to bed. When I walk into my bedroom, my clothes were everywhere. Mind you, I have very expensive clothes. I have a lot of designer, Fenty, Gucci. And as I got closer to some of my dresses, I could see that he had taken scissors and cut them up. I couldn't believe it. He then flat out denied that he did that. He said that there must have been a demon in my apartment. I asked him to leave and he wouldn't. I just cried myself to sleep. The next morning, I woke up to a weird sound. Luckily, he had already left. He wrote me an apology letter and showed up to my apartment with breakfast 20 minutes later. That's when he said that he had never acted that way before and that he was sorry. But I was traumatized. I let him in with the breakfast. I kept hearing something in my closet. He told me to just ignore it. It was like a really weird noise, but it would stop and then start again. He told me that it must have been something in the walls. Then he told me that he believed me, that I wasn't cheating on him. I even told him that he should just turn on my location so he could see where I am at all times. I know this isn't normal, but guys do get jealous, right? Ended up working things out and he went to work. And he promised he wouldn't do it again. That little noise started up again in my closet. But when I opened my closet, I saw a robotic teddy bear. It had 2 bulging eyes and I had never seen it before. It was just moving around my closet making noise. When I picked it up, it was all wet. I called my boyfriend and asked him if he put it there. That's when he said, no, I told you there's a demon in your apartment. He texted me later saying it was actually a gift for me. I don't know what to make of it. It's a weird looking bear. It turns on randomly and starts saying things like, I love you. My boyfriend is on his best behavior though. He hasn't accused me of anything and we haven't fought in over a week. In fact, he's been bringing me lunch and bought me all the dishes that he broke. He even took me to Gucci to replace the dress he cut up. I haven't told my friends or family because I'm kind of embarrassed. Do you guys think this is normal? I walked in on my boyfriend doing the dirty with his gay best friend. My boyfriend moved in with his gay best friend 6 months ago. Here's a little backstory. My boyfriend and I have been together for almost 2 years. My boyfriend is a social butterfly. He has 1,000,001 friends. I got used to this very quickly because most of them were female and a lot of them were gay. They actually became my friends too in some cases. Early on in the relationship, I met one of his best friends. Let's call him Tim. Tim is very, very gay. And he doesn't hide the fact that he thinks my boyfriend is very attractive. I asked my boyfriend if Tim ever made him feel uncomfortable, and he said no. But here's the thing. Tim sometimes says the most outlandish things about my boyfriend. Yeah, my boyfriend is hot. He's super fit, has a great face, so Timmy loves to comment on his body all the time. On several occasions, he's made really dirty jokes about my boyfriend's butt and the things that he'd like to do to my boyfriend's butt. Every time they go out, he's always trying to get my boyfriend drunk. And when he succeeds, he always takes off his shirt. So then my boyfriend spends the rest of the night shirtless. Obviously, this bothered me, but it didn't bother me enough to ever be concerned. Boy, was I wrong. A few weeks ago, Timmy threw a party and told my boyfriend not to invite me. I got really upset, so I showed up anyway. Timmy was trying to kiss my boyfriend. Part 2 is up. Walked in on my boyfriend doing the dirty with his gay best friend. I instantly knew the only reason I didn't get invited to the party was so that Tim could try to get with my boyfriend. But here's the thing. My boyfriend had so much patience for Timmy. Even though Timmy would make such perverted jokes about my boyfriend would laugh it off and tell me it wasn't a big deal. But I knew it did make him uncomfortable. But of course, I show up to the party anyway. When I got there, I found Timmy sitting on the couch with my boyfriend. My boyfriend was clearly drunk. And Timmy was trying to kiss his neck. As soon as Timmy saw me, he got up from the couch and asked me what I was doing there. He said that it was a boys only party. When I looked around, it actually was. There were no other women there. I told Timmy that I was going to take my boyfriend home and he said that I was overreacting and that my boyfriend was just having fun. I walk up to my boyfriend and he is so drunk, he doesn't even recognize me. I grabbed him and got him out of there. The next day, I told my boyfriend that Timmy was trying to kiss him when he was drunk. But of course, my boyfriend defended him. And my boyfriend confessed to me that he knows Timmy has a crush on him and that he's basically his best friend out of pity. Then my boyfriend actually told me I needed to stop being a bitch to Timmy. Part 3 is up. Walked in on my boyfriend doing the dirty with his gay best friend. That's when my boyfriend basically told me I needed to stop being a bitch to Tim. I decided to ghost my boyfriend for 2 days because I was so upset at him. But here's the thing, my boyfriend was ghosting me too. So I decided to go over to his apartment because I hadn't heard from him in 24 hours. My boyfriend had given me a key to his apartment, by the way. But before I put in the key to unlock the door, I hear moaning sounds coming from inside. I instantly knew what was happening. Quickly unlocked the door and find my boyfriend getting banged on the couch by his gay best friend. It's an image I can never forget. I'm actually traumatized. They separate and my boyfriend comes running over to me. First thing out of his mouth was, "We were just experimenting, it's not a big deal." He thought I was gonna be like, "Oh, cool. I look over at Timmy and he's on the couch smiling. I couldn't help myself and I slapped my boyfriend really hard. I ran away and didn't talk to him for 2 days. He finally came over to my apartment after those 2 days and explained that it was just something experimental. And he swears that they've never done it before and that they never will again. I took him back, but I don't trust him. He says that Timmy will always be his best friend and that I shouldn't get jealous. What should I do? My boyfriend's crazy ex fondled me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It's not on Instagram. This whole nightmare started 6 months ago. I met this cute guy at my job. I'm a manager at a cafe and I'm there all day long. This cute boy started coming in and of course I noticed him right away. Now I'm in the process of trying to buy this cafe because I really want to own it and make it better than what it is. One day he just started talking to me out of nowhere. And we spoke for about 4 hours. Even after the cafe closed, he stayed there and helped me close it. Told him about all the plans I had to make the cafe better. And he started coming to the cafe every single day. Fast forward a few weeks, we go on our first date. And fast forward a couple months, he asked me to be his girlfriend and I said yes. But at this point, it was already too late. Because this is when he decides to tell me that he's got a crazy ex. She's a bodybuilder. Literally looks like a man. Like a scary, jacked up guy. She starts coming into the cafe out of nowhere. The thing is, I didn't know who she was. I just knew this scary, muscular woman would come in all the time and just stare at me. And when I told him about this, his face turned white. That's when he tells me, "Oh my gosh, I think that's my ex." I describe him to her and her tattoos, and he's like, "Yep, that's her." That's when he told me I needed to hire security. But I refused to because I didn't think she was going to do anything crazy. After closing up the cafe, I walked to my car, and there she was. Without saying a word, she punches me in the stomach. Part 2 is my boyfriend's ex-girlfriend molested me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. Let's send me on Instagram. This woman punches me in the stomach. Now, let me remind you how big and muscular she is. She's like triple the size of me, pure muscle. She hit me so hard, I actually stayed on the ground for about 15 minutes just trying to catch my breath. When I looked up, she was gone. Called my boyfriend and he came with his best friend. That's when they told me that I seriously needed to get security and that he would walk me to my car every single night after closing my cafe. That very night, I broke up with him. There was absolutely no way I wanted this kind of drama in my life. I work almost all day. I do not have time for this. When I broke up with him, he said he understood, but that he would fight for me. And this is when things just got even worse. Instead of backing off, his crazy muscular ex started coming around. Let's name her Jackie. Jackie would come to my cafe at least once a week. Whenever she tried to come in, I'd have one of my employees lock the door. If she couldn't come in, she would just stare at me through the window. This is when I started getting threatening messages. I also started getting threatening emails. This is where I messed up. I closed the cafe one night by myself. I walked to my car thinking nothing would happen. This is when I hear footsteps right behind me as I approach my car, and a guy grabbed me from behind, pushed me up against my car, and started manhandling me. He touched me everywhere. I screamed so loud he actually ran away, but I knew it was her. She tried to put her fingers in there. Part 3 is my boyfriend's ex-girlfriend molested me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. After she waited for me to finish my job, she came up behind me, pushed me into my car, and started fondling me. Literally touched me everywhere. You guys, I started crying here because I haven't done colorful makeup in so long. I actually started feeling like myself again. Back to the story. Luckily, I did not freeze. I physically pushed against her body and just started yelling at the top of my lungs. And she ran away. You want to know how I know it was her? Number 1, I could feel a very muscular body behind me. And number 2, I smelled her perfume. I remember I told you guys that she'd come into the cafe several times before. I knew it was her smell because she would pour perfume on herself. My boyfriend knew that she did this because she always went to the gym and was afraid of smelling bad. I got straight into my car and drove to the police station. Of course, I reported her. Police were able to recover footage from the parking garage, and that's when they could see a really big muscular person behind me. It was all caught on camera. I ended up breaking up with him. This is just way too much. He should have warned me that he had a stalker and that she was crazy. Anyway, the police went to look for her, and guess what? They couldn't find her. She apparently moved to a different country. Remember in part 1 I told you I was celibate? I will never date again. Literally never. He wants me back, but I keep saying no. Oh yeah, and I'm officially a business owner. The cafe is doing so well. Should I take him back or should I just leave it? Just found out my boyfriend has a freaking wife. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. I met my boyfriend at the gym. Yeah, I know. Terrible idea. You can say it was lust at first sight. From the moment we saw each other at the gym, we couldn't take our eyes off each other. He came straight up to me at the gym and told me that he really liked me. But I was super shy. He was just some random guy I was meeting at the gym. But he was all about me. He asked me for my number and I said no. He asked me for my Instagram and I said no. For the next 2 weeks, he would come into the gym at exactly the same time I did. I would basically go work out whenever I had my lunch break. So of course, he would show up then. Of course, slowly but surely, he would charm me. He would even bring me lunch. After about 2 weeks, I finally gave him my phone number. That's when he asked me to go have breakfast, which I thought was weird. Should have been the first red flag, right? This was his excuse. He said he worked nights, but that his schedule would change all the time. So this meant that he would sometimes work during the day or at night. It was just random. So we went to breakfast. breakfast. Here's the second red flag. He asked me if we could have breakfast 40 minutes away from where we lived. We both lived near the gym. Of course I thought this was strange, but I said sure. He picked me up and the whole time at breakfast he kept looking at his phone. Part 2 is up. I just found out my boyfriend has a freaking wife. Disclaimer is not my story time. I sent me on Instagram. For our first date, we went to have breakfast 40 minutes away from where we both lived. Again, this was another red flag I ignored. During the breakfast, he was on his phone the entire time, and I called him out on it. I asked him why he invited me to breakfast if he was going to be on his phone all day. That's when he made up this whole sob story about how hard his work life was, how he was always stuck to his phone answering emails and text messages from his boss. And of course I believed it. I mean, I didn't know this guy from anything. After that, he put his phone down, and I realized he was the most amazing man I had ever met. A man that can make me laugh is really important to me, and we laughed the entire time. We were telling each other jokes, we talked about family and values, we talked about our favorite foods, countries we wanted to go to, places we had been to. It was the perfect date. We even loved the same type of music, and our favorite movie was the same. So as you can imagine, I completely fell head over heels for this man. But the red flags continued. A week after our first date, he asked me to be his girlfriend. Did I say yes? Of course I did. But this was just another red flag. He began love bombing me and always wanted to be with me, but he never invited me over to his place. Part 3 is up. Story time about how my stepdad caught me sending nudes to my stepbrother. Disclaimer is not my story time, it's not on Instagram. I'm 17 going on 18. This is like a roller coaster, so you better strap in. I met my stepbrother 3 years ago. He was a new guy at our school. From the moment we set eyes on each other, it was like love at first sight. But my best friend expressed that she liked him first. But there was no way I was gonna step on her toes. But he had no interest in her, at least not at the beginning. One day my bestie and I go to a party, and my stepbrother was there. My best friend is gutsy. This girl went up to him and said, "I like you." And then she kissed him. He was shook. For the rest of the night, they danced and kissed. I, of course, was happy for her, but to be honest, I did feel a little bit of jealousy. So I decided to hook up with somebody else. Now, my best friend has a lot of insecurities, and she has an ED. My stepbrother found out about this and felt bad for her. So he decided to ask her to be his girlfriend, which looking back was really nice of him, but it really messed with her mental health. So essentially, he started hanging out with us all the time. So I had to pretend I hated him in order to not show that I actually loved him. And one night, I kissed him. Part 2 is up. I matched with a murderer on Tinder. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. All of this happened 2 years ago, and if you are on a dating app, please be careful. I matched with this really cute guy on Tinder. He said he was a doctor, and he had all of these pictures to back it up. So I completely believed him when he said he was an oncologist. I was 22 at the time, and I realized that we did have a big age gap. You see, he was 36. We talked on Tinder for a couple of days, and then we moved over to text message. And he was so charming. He was reciting poetry to me. We even discussed the movie Pride and Prejudice. Looking back now, he asked me all of my favorite things. And from there, he started talking to me about my favorite movies, my favorite actors, favorite foods. I mean, he even sent me recipes. He was perfectly charming in every single way. Finally asked me out on a date, and we went to a beautiful, expensive dinner. The restaurant was right by a river. Then he surprised me with a boat ride on the river. Date was magical, almost too good to be true. Then things just got really strange. He was texting me nonstop for 2 days, asking me how I was, literally asking me what I ate for dinner, all over me. That's when he shows up unannounced to my apartment, and he's carrying a huge duffel bag. I mean huge and super heavy. And he tells me that his apartment flooded and that he didn't have anybody else to stay with, essentially asking me if he could stay at my place. I really didn't know if I should, but I thought, what's the worst that could happen? We already went on a date. I told him he could sleep on my couch, but that nothing would happen between us. He agreed and promised that he wouldn't try to make any moves on me. He comes in, puts his bag down, and just starts making dinner in my kitchen. He made soup and a beautiful salad. When I tried the soup, it tasted horrible. The first thing that ran through my mind was, oh my gosh, did he put something in this? But I couldn't believe that that would even be a possibility. We watched a movie and then I went to bed. I wake up to banging on my door at 2 in the morning. Do you know how scary that is? He yells, "I left my phone in there, I need to get it out." Then I realized, hold on a second, you didn't even come into my bedroom. First I pretended to be asleep just to not have to open, but then he kept banging louder, and then his voice got angry. He said, "I know you're awake, just let me in." I finally said, "Sorry, I'm not gonna let you in, you're acting strange." Then he laughed and said, "Oh my gosh, stop being so dramatic, just let me in." But I did not. I didn't tell him, but I called the cops. Luckily, I lived 2 minutes away from the police station. He did not know this. I went into my bathroom and told the cops to come right away. For the next 2 minutes, he went silent. I pressed my ear to the door. I could hear him unzipping something, putting stuff down, and suddenly he starts banging on the door again. That's when the cops knock on my door and he goes to open. 10 seconds later, the cops knock on my door and tell me it's safe to come out. But the cop says, "Be prepared for what you're about to see." I open my door and there on my living room floor, there's a plastic tarp, knives, handcuffs, whips. Apparently this guy had been terrorizing women all around town. But fortunately, he had not unalived anybody. He would SA them and then tie them up and do things. But none of these women had reported him except for me. He went to prison and called me apologizing. Be careful out there. Storytime about how my husband stole my dog because I told his family that he's gay. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. My husband and I had been married for 6 months before I realized he was gay. The way I found out is horrendous. Husband, almost ex, he has a gardening business. This means he works with a lot of guys. The guys that he started hiring were all very young, very attractive. Obviously, I didn't care because I never thought that he would be gay. Well, I come home one day early from work, only to find him and 3 other guys on the couch, doing different things to each other. I was horrified. I was seriously triggered and traumatized. You see, I had been essayed by 2 boys when I was in college, so walking into this literally made me vomit. Even got flashbacks. What did my husband do? The man kicked me out of the house, closed the door on me. So I proceed to start ringing the doorbell. So I decide to call 911 and say that there's 2 intruders in my house, which I mean there are. By the time the police come, they're all dressed up. Of course, it was my word against theirs. The police told me that all I could do was get a divorce. At the time, I had a 2-month-old puppy. My husband didn't really like the puppy. He was a lot of work, but it was my responsibility. After I caught him, I ran straight to his mom's house and spilled the beans. His mom and dad were furious. They called him, but he wouldn't answer his phone. Called my sister and she told me that I should just go live with her. I go home to grab my things and my puppy, but my puppy is nowhere to be found. That's when my husband told me that he probably ran away. This man refused to help me look for him. I'm filing a divorce, but it's been a month since I saw my puppy, and I know the puppy's somewhere in the house. My husband doesn't let me back into the house though, and the cops were absolutely no use. I'm planning on breaking in. I mean, what should I do? Give me advice.